Welcome to the Dinosaur George podcast, a show about paleontology and other earth sciences. Dinosaur George is a public speaker, author, and TV host with 30 years of study in paleontology. He has performed live in over 4,500 events across the US and Canada. Now, here is Dinosaur George.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to my latest podcast. In this episode, our featured creature is going to be Nasutoceratops, a really interesting ceratopsian. I'll introduce you to a young man who, when he's not out hunting fossils, he's volunteering his time working in the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. How cool is that? And then I'll answer some listener questions for those of you who wrote in or called in. And finally, I'll also stream live on Facebook and answer some questions through there as well. So sit back, relax, and let's get ready to travel back in time to learn about some of the really cool creatures that once called this planet home.
Raptors are the most deadly dinosaurs that ever lived, and now you can own their replica claws, feet, and skulls. Imagine your own velociraptor skull or the foot of a giant Utah raptor. Raptor hand claws and deadly killer claws are just some of the items you'll find in our web store. We accept all forms of payment and ship worldwide. Our pricing is affordable and we don't charge outrageous shipping or handling fees. Visit our website at store.dinosaurgeorge.com and start your collection today.
It's time for our Feature Creature segment. If you would like to suggest a creature, go to dinosaurgeorgepodcast.com and post it in the comments section of this episode, or email us your suggestions to contact@dinosaurgeorge.com. And now, our feature creature.
Our feature creature is Nasutoceratops. So this is a relatively new species of ceratopsian that was found in Utah. Ceratopsians, of course, are the guys that are related to Styracosaurus and Triceratops. And those guys, it was a quadruped herbivore that lived in the late Cretaceous about 76 million years ago. For you younger folks, quadruped means that it walks on all fours. And of course, herbivore means it's out there eating plants. It was discovered in south central Utah and included almost a complete skull. And that's always hard to find. The skull material is always difficult to find. But they found a nearly complete skull and found that this dinosaur was about 5 meters long, which is 15 feet, and it weighed about 2.5 tons. Now, why do we always say about, and it was about this long and about this much? Well, the reason for it is because there's no way of knowing those things exactly. Even if you found a complete skeleton of a dinosaur, you cannot say with absolute certainty how close together or how far apart all of the vertebrae were. And that may not sound like a big deal, but when you multiply just an inch over the entire length of the dinosaur, including its tail verts all the way up to its neck verts, that can add a substantial amount of length to the animal. And of course, understanding weight is very difficult because you just cannot say with any sense of certainty how much the animal would have weighed. We don't know with absolute certainty how thick is the hide, how heavy was the musculature. That kind of stuff is always difficult. So when you see these estimates of size, it's always based on using the most recent scientific methods and comparing it to modern animals. These paleontologists are able to come up with size and weight and that sort of stuff. Now, what's really cool about Nasutoceratops is its horn configuration. Looks more like a cow with sort of the inward-facing horns, and that's really unusual why these dinosaurs had that unique look. I will tell you this. I've got an expert who's lined up who hopefully I'll be able to interview him, and he is much, much more knowledgeable about this dinosaur than anybody. And I don't want to mention his name because we may not be able to schedule-wise get him to come on. It's just very difficult. These people are very busy, and finding time to do these is hard. But if I can get him on, I can assure you that the information he'll give us is going to be absolutely incredible. So I'm not going to go into any great detail about Nasutoceratops in the event that we're able to get him on and give us more. But for those of you that are interested to look him up, Nasutoceratops is how you spell his name. He's really a cool looking dinosaur, and I think you'll like him. All right, when we come back, I'll share an interview with a young man who has given much of his time to volunteering in museums and sharing his knowledge about paleontology with all of the people who visit that museum.
Do you or someone you know like prehistoric life? Are you looking for that perfect gift for the dinosaur lover in your family? Our web store is filled with hundreds of replica claws, teeth, skulls, and more. Start a collection of your favorite animals today. Tyrannosaurus teeth, raptor claws, ice-aged mammal skulls, and more can be found in our catalog. Our prices are very affordable, and we don't add hidden or excessive shipping or handling charges. Visit us at store.dinosaurgeorge.com.
You know, a lot of people, young people especially, ask me how to become a paleontologist. Well, obviously the answer is a higher education if you want to be a degreed paleontologist. But for those of you who are not starting college now, and for those of you who maybe don't want to make it a career, there are other ways to get your foot in the door and rack up some experience. My guest today has done just that. It's my pleasure to welcome to the show my friend Dylan DeWitt. Dylan, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing fine, George. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, man, it is absolutely my pleasure. So it's normal for me to ask our guest to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live? Kind of some things about you personally.
Okay, so I'm a 17-year-old lives in Denver, Colorado. I guess I should say that since I was at the age of 4, I fell in love with kind of paleontology as a whole, specifically dinosaurs. And that kind of whole thing started when I visited the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, which now I currently volunteer in, which I'll talk in a little bit. But, I visited the Prehistoric Journey Museum, which is, or not the museum, the exhibit, which holds kind of the prehistoric timeline of planet Earth and kind of shows kind of like how life evolved from, the Cambrian era all the way to the human, like early humans living in North America. So that's kind of where my love for paleontology has came from, and it has not ended since. It's a bug that never has gone away.
It is so remarkable that all the guests, and even when I talk to some of the world's leading paleontologists, it always seems to be sparked by a visit to a museum. And I don't know what it is, because when we're little, we can't comprehend everything about them. What is it, though, that makes such an impact in your life when you see a museum and you see a skeleton or you see a fossil for the first time? What do you think does that?
Well, I think with the Denver Museum, the Prehistoric Journey exhibit, some of the fossils on display, like the classic Allosaurus versus Stegosaurus, they're set in such a dynamic poses that kind of like transports you to how the animals were when they were in life. It's not just they're just put into a straight pose. No, they're put into an action pose. Like you can kind of put yourself in the setting of the Jurassic period, and you see over at one end, you see at the Diplodocus, treading along the Jurassic forest, while you see an Allosaurus trying to hunt Stegosaurus and its young. So it's kind of an interesting thing to put yourself into that setting. It's the whole imagination play, and that's just I think that's why everyone loves dinosaurs, either to the general public or amateur paleontologists like myself, and like you even said, the professionals. We all have such an imagination about how these creatures used to live. So I just find that amazing. So I guess that's kind of how to answer your question. I
get, yeah. I mean, that's a great answer, because you're right. When you're little, you don't have any limitations on your imagination at all. So you're just this little guy looking up at these giants, and you see the whole thing playing out in front of you. And I got to tell you, one of the things that that's changed a lot A lot. You said you're what, 17? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so I'm 1 or 2 years older than you. So I don't know if you know or not, but I've been 39 for almost 20 straight years. But
oh, nice.
Yeah, all you have to do is go to my Facebook page and you'll see I've been 39 for 21 years. When I was a kid, the museums oftentimes just lined up the dinosaur skeletons like tin soldiers. They didn't put a lot of emphasis on the motion and the movement. So today's museums really encourage imagination from a kid because, like you just described, that Allosaurus stegosaurus scene, I mean, you see it playing out in front of you. So I can certainly understand how all of us, when we were kids, looked up and saw something that just sparked our imagination. And, you know, I'm thrilled to hear you haven't lost it. I think a lot of people go through phases, but I'm glad to hear that you hadn't lost it. So talking about dinosaurs, and this is always a tough question, do you have a favorite dinosaur?
Well, George, to say simply, you're absolutely correct. That's one of the toughest questions you can ask paleo enthusiasts. I'm sure as you asked my friend Cam Muskelly, you did an interview with him. He loves so many things about paleontology, prehistoric creatures. But not to get off topic, I would say that Nasutoceratops has to be one of my favorite dinosaurs, and one thing we have in common is that Allosaurus is another favorite, but more predominantly Nasutoceratops.
You know, it's funny you mention that because obviously in doing research about my guests, I always have to figure out things, and knowing that was one of your favorites, that is the feature creature for this episode, and it was done in honor of you. So, yeah. So everybody listening to this podcast would have heard information about that dinosaur. It's not extremely well known outside of the paleo community, but what a cool looking dinosaur that thing is.
Absolutely. I love it so much, Now
obviously paleontology, most people immediately assume it's all dinosaurs. Do you have an interest in some of the other prehistoric life other than dinosaurs?
Absolutely. To kind of go into what I do, as I previously mentioned, I'm a volunteer at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and my biggest project working there was working on the, as we're saying it is, the largest mastodon known so far. So I've actually worked on trying to restore it by prepping the fossils. This is collected from Snowmass, Colorado, which is kind of in the mountain areas. It's the kind of medium-sized ski town.
Right. And
there was a whole project there back in 2010 when they were trying to build a reservoir, and they found a huge mammoth skeleton. So they called some of the guys from the Denver Museum to come down. And this whole thing happened where they found so many Ice Age animals. As I previously said, mammoths and mastodons, giant sloths, big bison, camels, interestingly enough, and then a whole bunch of microvertebrate fossils have been found from the area. But I worked on one of the mastodons, so that was incredibly fun. So,
man,
Ice Age animals are definitely another interest of mine. And then I kind of have some interest into the late Triassic kind of reptiles, kind of like the what's the name? The crocodiles, like
Smilosukis or those kind of guys.
Kind of the
Postosuchus, any of those?
No, oh God,
doesn't that drive you crazy when you?
Phytosaurs.
Yeah, there you go. Phytosaurs. Absolutely, man.
Oh my God. I just did a major brain.
You know what?
Brain fart.
That happens. Yeah. That happens to everybody. Well, yeah, phytosaurs are really cool. Well, I'm glad that you like a variety of different things, because I think that as young people mature and they learn more, when they discover things outside of dinosaurs, like you said, the mammals and the fish and the reptiles, there's so many incredible things. And that's exciting that you got a chance to work on that mastodon, because that's really cool. Well, let me tell you something, man. You and I, now we're friends on Facebook, and I looked at your page, I've been to your page a number of times, and there's numerous pictures that would appear to be you out in the field. Do you get the opportunity to go out and hunt fossils?
Yeah, so this summer I worked with a paleontologist over at the Museums of Western Colorado. His name is Robert Gay, and he runs a program specifically for high school students to go out in southwest Utah in an area called Comb Ridge. So it's kind of late Triassic. It's a late Triassic deposit, as dinosaurs and stuff about that. And I can't necessarily talk too much information about it because there's a lot coming from there. But that was such an amazing experience to actually go out in the field and work with a paleontologist, discover fossils, those kinds of things.
Yeah, was the work what you expected, or was it harder or easier than what you thought it would be?
I already knew with working with paleontologists at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science and, paleontologists on Facebook that I'm friends with, that field work is definitely not easy. You've got the elements you got to worry about, just the hard work, so many things I'm sure your other guests have probably mentioned. But going into it, I definitely knew it was going to be hard, but it was just a little bit harder. And I think it's possibly because of its geography, because we're kind of near the Arizona border. And
oh, wow.
If people living in the United States know, in the western part, know that Arizona is kind of like the oven of the country. So it was definitely hot. Hottest I've ever experienced, about 105 degrees. So it was some hard stuff, and I was surprised I was able to get through it without passing out or throwing up because of the extreme heat.
Right.
But I was able to manage somewhat fine. So there are definitely challenges to going out there.
I was in the desert in Arizona picking up fossilized coral with a friend, and it was 113 degrees. And that's the first time somebody said, yeah, but it's a dry heat. And I'm like, you know what? That's just something you came up with to convince yourself you're not roasting to death. So I know exactly.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
And it's those moments that, Dylan, when you're cooking in that kind of temperature, that you realize that it's not just a love, it's now become an illness.
Absolutely. I think this is incredibly random, but I think I was dehydrated so much because we were kind of prospecting. So to kind of explain what prospecting is to your younger audience, or your whoever doesn't know what that means, it means when paleontologists and volunteers look for a potential site that has any fossils that haven't been found before. So it's kind of like looking for a place bones are found. So while we were prospecting, we kind of hiked up this large mountain, and I was really dehydrated, and apparently Robert was saying that I was kind of mumbling some songs or something because of the dehydrated state I was in, and he was telling me to stop singing and keep drinking. So you do have some of those moments out there where having to deal with crazy things like that, as I said,
right.
Heat, or as the locals say, the quote unquote dry heat. But I agree with you. Heat is heat. Nothing really different about that.
That's right. Yeah, but what an experience. I mean, assuming you live through it, what an experience, though, to be able to tell your friends and family. I mean, how difficult is it when you go back to school after a summer like that, and you go back to school and you try to explain to your friends what you did over your summer vacation? How hard is it to explain to them what you got to do?
I usually get the same reactions as you just had, about just pure laughter, about singing while I was nearly dying of dehydration. But in all seriousness, they were incredibly impressed. I was able to go out to a remote location and do fantastic work. So
right. Well, good.
I got a lot of good reception from that.
Man, that's good. So let me ask you, Dylan, do you think paleontology is going to be a career for you, or is it just going to be a love that you'll always carry with you?
Well, I definitely would like it to be a career. I love, as I previously stated, have loved paleontology, not just dinosaurs or any of that, paleontology since I was about 4 years old. So I'm definitely hoping that it can be a potential career for me, but in the likelihood it doesn't work out, I would love to have it being, as you said, a love or a hobby or something like that. So either way, it's not going to go away from me, but it'll just kind of depend on numerous factors.
Right. Well, you certainly live in one of the best places on earth if you do have a love for it. There's so many opportunities. Have you had a chance? Excuse me, I just coughed. Have you had a chance to visit Mike Triebold's Rocky Mountain Dinosaur Research Center? Have you ever had a chance to go see that museum? How'd you like it? I
enjoyed it so much, and this is kind of another thing I wanted to talk about, and one of the things I've done in my quote unquote career. I did meet with a paleontologist named Robert De Palma, who, with your guest didn't know, was the one who described and named Dakotaraptors. So I, in fact, met Robert down at the research center and actually helped him, kind of fix his Dakotaraptor cast that he was going to install at the museum there.
Right.
So that was I'm sure the kids are probably squealing at the fact that I got to help hold a Dakotaraptor,
Right.
And I did get to meet with Mike and the crew there. And I told him, because I'm a huge fan of your podcast, as you already know, and I've listened to that podcast before going down there. So meeting Mike, I was like, yeah, I heard a lot about you. I was actually on my way down to when I was going to the research, and I was actually re-listening to the podcast you did with him, just kind of like as a special thing. So he said you were a fantastic guest to speak with. So yeah, it was a very nice place. I'm incredibly impressed with the museum. The people there are some of the best I've ever met before in terms of personality and good work. So I absolutely loved it.
That's
recommend
so cool.
it for anyone who's in the area.
Nice. So let's talk about your volunteer work. Let's talk about what you do now. Now, the museum you're volunteering in now isn't the first museum you volunteered at, right?
Yeah, and actually the first one, kind of, jumping back from when I was 4, about a decade later when I was 14, my first museum I actually volunteered was the Morrison Natural History Museum, which is in Morrison, Colorado, about half an hour away from Denver. And I worked under paleontologist Matthew Mossbrucker and Robert Bacher, which was, I have a funny story to tell that when I first met him, I didn't know, I was kind of like the dinosaur-obsessed kid. I didn't know how much of an impact he was in the community until like 5 months into my volunteering, and I see all these posts about, I call him Dr. Bob, that's what we all called him, him being like a legend in the community. And I go up to him like, oh my God, I didn't even know you were like this absolute legend. He was like, I know. So I kind of just treated him like, a normal guy, but it's when you kind of realize someone you're working with is like an absolute legend, it's just everything changes in terms of your perspective. So, yeah.
I'll tell you my favorite Dr. Bacher moment. We were in Pennsylvania. We were talking about shooting a television show, and he and I sat out one morning by a pond, a koi pond, watching these fish, and it was nobody else out there. It was just he and I, and we spent about 20 minutes not even talking about dinosaurs, just talking about where we grew up and how we grew up. It was the most relaxing moment. I had met him a number of times before. He's always been really nice to me. He's always been really nice to me.
He's a great person.
He really is. I like him a lot. And he and I got to sit there, and we didn't talk dinosaurs. We just talked about life. And that was one of the most enjoyable things. And he's always been a good guy. So I'm thrilled that you got to work with him. What a great opportunity. So now that was your first museum that you volunteered in. What are you doing now?
So as I mentioned before, numerous times, I'm a volunteer at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. I actually have 2 positions at the museum because the museum is incredibly diverse in its volunteer program, one of the best actually. My first one is I'm a volunteer as a kind of exhibitor for the Prehistoric Journey exhibit, we have kind of touch carts set out in different points of the exhibit. So we have one in a section we call Land Ahoy, which is kind of like the Carboniferous and Permian period, talking about the kind of like the evolution of like land-dwelling, amphibians and reptiles and their kind of rise. We have one called the Bone Bar, which is our most popular one because it has all the dinosaur stuff in it. We have an Ice Age cart, several different carts. And we speak with visitors who come to the museum. We show them these items and kind of relate to the fossils in the exhibit and, answer their questions, offer them, guidance, and just, interact with the public is essentially what it is.
Right. So,
sorry.
Oh, man, I mean, what a great opportunity to get to speak publicly, because that's hard for people to do. That's very difficult to feel comfortable in doing it. So what you'll probably find is whether you decide paleontology is your career choice or not, just the opportunities and the experience you're getting and interacting with the public is going to be very helpful for you.
Yeah, I find it really does kind of how the public, kind of sees paleontology and how much they know kind of generally from a general consensus of the questions I receive.
Right.
And all that. So it is amazing.
That's cool. So you get to do the touch carts, but you said you did a second volunteer thing. What else do you do?
So my other position is working in the fossil prep lab. So as I mentioned, I worked on a mastodon, and then I kind of do just several different projects at the museum. Sometimes work on stuff from Hell Creek, or one of our paleontologists, his name's Tyler Leeson, is running kind of a research project there with collaborations from other museums like the Smithsonian and the Royal Ontario Museum. And it's a collaborative process that he does. And he has volunteers go to the Hell Creek Formation in Montana and North Dakota, which is kind of a future field experience I'm hoping to go to next year. But I also work on stuff from Madagascar, surprisingly. We have some paleontologists who every other year go to Madagascar and collect some fossils from there. So that's it's an amazing thing to just bear sight to something from so far away. And, we work on stuff from, it's a formation called the San Juan Basin, which is another Cretaceous formation, if your guests didn't know. And then we work on my favorite kind of formation. It's called the Perewitz Formation. It's in mid-south Utah, and it has dinosaurs like, is my favorite, Nasutoceratops, and it has, Parasaurolophus, and then some, nasty carnivores like early tyrannosaurs like Pterophonius and Lithronax. Right. It's a really interesting thing to see. It's kind of the last frontier of American paleontology in terms of dinosaurs. So it's amazing to see so many fossils from so many different locations. So it's one of my favorite things to be doing. So when you say you work on them, obviously you and I are familiar with what you're doing, but imagine for a moment for my younger listeners, when they hear you say you work on the fossils, give a little more detail of exactly what it is you're doing when you say that. So when I say working on, I kind of mean that I prepare the fossils, which in some cases means removal of dirt surrounding the fossil, or as people in the community call it, matrix. So, excuse me. So we, sometimes we use several different tools. Even on some fossils, we can even use water and a toothbrush and kind of just brush away the bone and have it, looking nice, while sometimes we'll need to use dental picks and kind of scrape away dirt from fossils. And then obviously for fossils that are jacketed, which is like when you remove a fossil with matrix surrounding it and you put plaster around it and different stuff, you need to use a thing we call air scribe, which is like a very tiny jackhammer to kind of remove the matrix around the fossil. So preparing that's kind of what preparing is. If your younger audience were to know in detail.
Right. So if they've ever watched TV, they see the guy running the little machine that almost looks like you're drawing on the rock, but in fact, you are breaking up that rock to separate the rock that's stuck to the fossil underneath. And you've got to be really careful because you could go right through the fossil, right?
Yeah, because as some people know, the fossil is kind of in the same composition as like the surrounding rock. Sometimes the fossil is as the same density or even lighter. So in fact, if your air scribe goes too near the bone, you can definitely break the bone badly. So it is a very delicate, and you require a lot of patience with that kind of thing, which is something I'm trying to learn to have on some of my projects. It definitely really tests your patience. It's like the ultimate test, I would say.
Well, when I used to prep fossils for the longest time, and one of the things I found was it was very relaxing and almost therapeutic, and I didn't realize hours would go by. I was so focused on trying to clean the bone. When you get in there and you work, do you ever lose track of time? Do you ever look up and go, oh my gosh, I've been here for 3 hours doing this?
Absolutely. There's some days where I go in the lab and work on a big jacket at like 11 o'clock. And then, as you say, it's a time-releasing, process where you just kind of lose track of time. You just are slowly looking on the fossil. And then sometimes it really is, oh, crap, it's like 4 o'clock. Where's the time go by? Something like that. So I totally agree and I've had that same experience that you just said. Right. So it's definitely a similar feeling.
Right. Now, in a museum, you obviously hear a lot of people comment things. Do you find that it's difficult when you hear someone, let's say an adult talking to a child, and the information they're giving them is completely wrong? Do you find it difficult to either not step up and correct them, or if you're instructed to do so, are you eager to want to explain? How difficult is that to do? So
it kind of depends on what the information is stating. So, like, let's say that they say, like, Allosaurus is like, or if they say the Allosaurus is like a T-Rex, I'll obviously kind of step in if it's like convenient enough. Like, I'm not going to scream across the room, that's not an Allosaurus, that's a T-Rex. Or
well,
reverse it.
We're talking about Allosaurus. I expect you to do that.
Oh God! I mean,
he's my favorite dinosaur.
That's not a T-Rex. I know. I won't obviously scream across the exhibit just saying that, but if they're like, a couple feet next to me, I'll kind of just correct them saying, actually, that's not a T-Rex. That's an Allosaurus. It's kind of a relative, great granddaddy of a T-Rex. But on more controversial issues like, creationism and stuff like that, I usually try my best not to engage in anyone who, kind of has that belief, because it is kind of museum policy not to kind of attack someone else's belief.
Sure.
And I totally, that it's one of my moral codes because, I obviously respect religion, but, it's hard to,
good
hard
for
to not
you.
step in and
absolutely
and criticize them. But I have enough respect for those people to, while I shouldn't probably talk about my feelings on the subject, but
sure. But listen,
I have enough respect.
I'm glad to hear that you're respectful enough, because if it comes down to it, you're probably not going to change any minds, and there's no reason to turn a visit into a museum into a confrontation. I teach my staff the same thing, and I'll tell, like, I've had people come up and say they don't believe dinosaurs ever existed, and my answer is always the same. You know what? I completely respect your opinion. I just don't share it. And that's
Absolutely.
it. And good for you for doing that as well. Now, let me ask you, are there any particular moments you can think of where maybe kids said something funny or somebody asked you a funny thing? Is there any of those at the top of your mind?
So I want to say one of the most common questions that always kind of bugs me, just due to that kind of fuels that like disbelief in dinosaurs. I think one of the most common questions I receive is, so are all the like I'm quoting them directly, are some of these fossils like real, or are they kind of fake? And then I always say the fossils in the exhibit are hybrids, so they contain real fossils and casted fossils. And the casted fossils are not just built up by some person. Usually most of the time they're based off real specimens. And I explain to them the reason why cast fossils are incredibly important, due to fossil resources and durability and weight and all that. But every time I get that, I'm happy to point out the misconception. It kind of just triggers me just a little bit every time, but obviously I don't show it.
We deal with the same thing, and I almost want to say, if I told you they were all real, would you suddenly have a better experience? Or if I told you that they were all replicas, would that ruin your experience? I've never understood the fascination with, are these real or not? It's almost like some people think they're being duped. And so they want to know if it's real. And I mean, your answer is absolutely perfect. It is, well, in your particular case, part of the bones are real, but it can become frustrating, especially if they ask almost in a accusatory manner, like you're trying to pull one over on us, and I just caught you. I had a teenage kid one time in front of a bunch of his friends, really rude, and I'm very respectful of people, but this kid walked up, and he was so disrespectful, and he stood there and he said, "Are you trying to tell me this is real?" I said, "Well, what do you think it is, a holographic image?" And he just stared at me and said, "Of course it's real. It takes up space. It has mass. Of course it's real." Now, maybe you were thinking of the word authentic, which is a big word. And so the kid just walked off. But,
I'm sure he didn't want to win that or try to debate you on that, the expert on this case.
Yeah. Well, now let me ask you something, Dylan. Can you give a young person, because clearly you've been accepted in 2 different museums and you've worked with some pretty important people, can you give some advice to some of the younger people who may want to try to volunteer at a museum? Can you kind of tell them sort of what got your foot in the door? How is it that you were able to do this?
So it is just because of my, my huge passion for this subject that I, at a certain age, kind of just sought out, volunteer opportunities to kind of work with paleontologists, work on fossils, work the public, so I tried to outreach as much as I could, first case being the Morrissey Museum. And I think with most museums, if I'm correct, that they usually hire people in their mid-teens, so maybe around 15 or 16 at least, when you can work by yourself. So for the younger listeners, they probably would have to volunteer with a parent, because I know some kids who are, around 11 who volunteer with their parents. But, when they get to a certain age, they can absolutely try, if they have a local museum, fossil museum or whatever, they can absolutely try to, apply as a volunteer and see whatever they can do. And with me, in fact, at the Morrissey Museum, it wasn't exactly how I was expected. I was expected, I can work on fossils and stuff. But most of the time I was giving tours around the museum. So just kind of like with life, you may have, you may start out at a lower position, but you kind of just work your way up, kind of working up the food chain, if you will. And even at the Denver Museum, that's kind of what I did, just in the last year. That's when I started working in the lab. So I just say, just go for it. If you see an opportunity that rises, absolutely go for it. And if it doesn't seem like you'll get anywhere, just keep pushing, and, like me, you'll eventually get somewhere. So just kind of share your passion, I guess, if that makes sense.
Great advice. He is Dylan DeWitt. He is a fossil preparator. He's a volunteer at museums. He's a fossil hunter, and he is definitely going to be a future paleontologist. Dylan, it has been such a pleasure speaking with you and learning about what you do. The next time I'm in Colorado, I'll drop by the museum and you can kind of give me a tour of everything and teach me about some of the things in there. Man, thank you so much for taking time out to come on to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you, George. I appreciate the offer. I sincerely do.
You bet. And again, I expect to hear good things from you. And maybe one of these days you can take me out digging and we'll go to Arizona and cook to death in the desert. Then I can hear your song.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, we can make a folk song about it, like a tale.
We're going to get you a shirt that says Dylan DeWitt, the singing dying paleontologist.
Sure, I get that out on wholesale on online sale.
Yeah, good luck with that. Dylan, thank you so much, buddy.
Thank you, George. I appreciate it.
It's time to ask Dinosaur George. In this segment, George answers your questions about paleontology. If you would like to leave a voice message, call us at 210-888-9077. This is not a toll-free call, so children, please ask your parents' permission. If you would like to submit your question in writing, go to dinosaurgeorge.com and click the Ask Dinosaur George page. Questions are chosen at random and we clear all messages monthly. So if you have a question about paleontology, ask Dinosaur George.
All right, everybody, we're going to take some time to answer some of the questions that some of you have submitted in. We'll start with Daniel from Israel. He said, "Hey, DG, I really enjoy your new podcast, and I have a question for you. In my childhood, I saw a movie, and there was a scene that shows a couple of Giganotosauruses attacking a herd of Saltosauruses and killing one in this group really easily because of their giant size. How can it be that herbivores are so vulnerable to this predator?" Well, Daniel, one of the things you have to remember about television is oftentimes entertainment is more important than education. And so predators do not kill something as easily as is often depicted in TV, even with modern animals. You know, a lot of times they show modern animals attacking something and catching it, but what they don't show you is the 30 or 40 other times where modern predators missed, because that's not that exciting. Well, the same would have occurred during the age of dinosaurs, where you would have had dinosaurs that would have attacked a number of times, and yet they probably wouldn't have made a successful kill, but maybe once out of every, say, 15 or 20 times. All right, thank you for writing to me, buddy. I appreciate it. All right, let's go to Joseph from Gothenburg, Sweden. Hello, Mr. Blassing. Hey, Joseph, it's nice to hear from you. By the way, Joseph, I appreciate very much you calling me Mr., but you can call me George. I wondered if you know of any dinosaurs found in Sweden or Scandinavia. I've never heard of anyone except for things like mosasaurs living in that part of the country. What knowledge do you have? All the best from me to you, Joseph from Sweden. Joseph, thank you very much. That is incredibly kind of you, buddy, and my best to you and your family as well. Okay, I am unaware, Joseph, of any dinosaurs from Sweden or Scandinavia. I am so sorry, but I just don't know any. I wish I had a better answer than that, my friend, but unfortunately I don't. But if I ever find out, I will certainly post it. Brandon from my friend on Facebook. Hey, Brandon, thank you so much. And thank you for telling me I'm your favorite paleontologist. That's very kind of you, and it's my pleasure. Hugo, my compliments for all the great things you do. Thank you, Hugo. That's very kind of you. That's very good. And then my very good friend, Sarah Toms Berquist. This is awesome, DG. So glad I got to be on Facebook. Sarah, I am so glad to have you and your husband and your cute family as friends of mine. It is a pleasure for me, and I really love you guys very much, and I can't wait to meet all of you. And if you do come through San Antonio sometimes, let me know, because I would love to meet you. Bruce Schillinglaw, always good to hear from you. These are going by so fast I can't read any of them. Eduardo, it's nice to see you. So anyway, all right, let me jump back into this. And for those of you listening to this podcast, I'm just doing a live broadcast on Facebook at the same time. What got me into paleontology, Matt? It was just something that I absolutely loved as a kid. I just never grew out of it. And it just continues to this day. Alex, good to hear from you. Alex, I know you wrote to me and told me you sent me a question about sauropods, but I mean sauropods, but I couldn't find it anywhere. The music, Tim, I'm going to play for it in just a moment. Hey, Katie, it's nice to see you. And Sarah, again, it's so good to hear from you. All right, let me get in here and answer another one real quick. This is from Jeffrey from Acton, Massachusetts. Hello, Dinosaur George. Could a bear dog do the dog face like is shown in this image? Let me see what he sent me. Yes, I watch a lot of Bolt. That was the face of a dog in Bolt. Could a bear dog do that? I don't know, my friend. My feeling, Jeffrey, is that you wouldn't want to be close enough to a bear dog to get that look, even if he could do it. Okay, let's see. Who else? Luke is writing to me. You ever think of coming to North Dakota? Man, I wish I could, Luke. Trust me, I'd love to get back up there again. Mark Keene, buff down the light on your head. Mark, oh, you evil, evil man. That is my shining glory. What happened is my brain is so big, it has literally pushed my hair completely out of my head. Thank you for writing. I really appreciate it. Now I've just got to figure out how to ban that guy, block him from keep coming back on to my to my page. Michael, hey, can't wait to come back to Del Rio and see all of you guys, man. Your event is going to be a big deal, and I'm really looking forward to that. I really do. And then Stephen Brooks. Oh, thank God. Stephen, I read the first part that said, thanks for all the work you do for the next generation of dino lovers. I was worried because I didn't think you were going to say something mean, but you ended it with, even if you are disillusioned about your age. So thank you. All right. Let me answer another one real quick. This is Jacob from Philadelphia. Let's see. It says Philadelphia, Mississippi. Oh, so from Mississippi. Well, he's from both Philadelphia and lived in Mississippi, I guess. Aloha, Dr. Blasing. Hey, Jacob, that's very kind of you, but I did not get my degree in paleontology. I am not a professional paleontologist. So as much as I appreciate being referred to doctor, I never, ever want to take away from those men and women who have gone through all that schooling necessary to get that title. That's very kind of you. I am a 17-year-old Hawaiian boy going on 18, and I have a theory I wanted to share with you. In one of your earlier videos, you mentioned that Spinosaurus would have a hard time fishing because it would lose heat in the water. Is it possible that Spinosaurus had the characteristic sail so that it would not lose heat while it's fishing? Thank you for reading this, and I hope you have a nice day. P.S. I hope you make your way to Mississippi sometime. Would love to come to Mississippi, Jacob. And yes, I completely agree with you. When I said he would have a hard time fishing, what I mean is that you would lose body heat simply because of the temperature of the water. The temperature of the water is always going to be colder than the body temperature of an animal. And so it's going to draw the heat out of the body. So that sail would make perfect sense, that it would be something that they would probably need to be able to survive. All right, one more. This comes from Tony from Hope Mills, North Carolina. Hey, DG, I wanted to let you know that you're an inspiration for becoming a paleontologist, and I wish nothing but the best for you. Tony, what a very kind thing to say. That's very kind of you, and I appreciate you saying that. That's very kind of you. Here's my question. I read an article that said that relatives of Allosaurus living in Antarctica, that there were relatives of Allosaurus living in Antarctica. Can you explain? Yes, they found dinosaurs in Antarctica that have the same family, or in the same family as Allosaurus. So they refer to them as polar allosaurs, but it's not Allosaurus specifically. It is a different species of dinosaur that is related to them. Okay, there's my buddy Ray. Ray, I hope you're busy. I know things have been crazy, so I hope you're busy. Dean Hollyoak, Maposaurus versus Giganotosaurus. Woo, tough one. From what I know, I'd say Giganotosaurus would probably be able to beat the other guy. All right, everybody, that's it for this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. You know, I had such a good time messing around with the live feed on Facebook. I will definitely attempt to let more people know about a specific time to do it, and let you write in, and we can answer. I can answer questions live. Make sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter. You'll see links on my podcast page. The podcast page is dinosaurgeorgepodcast.com. That's how you can link up and follow me on Facebook and on Twitter. While you're on my website, dinosaurgeorge.com, please take some time to look at the catalog. at store.dinosaurgeorge.com, because it always helps me greatly if you're able to see something there that you like. In the meantime, make sure to take care of yourself and the people around you. Treat everybody with respect, because it makes the world such a nice place to live in. Until next time, take care, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Dinosaur George Show. Please follow us on our social media links and join our mailing list. If you're interested in having Dinosaur George speak at your event, please visit our website at dinosaurgeorge.com. Until next time, keep digging for clues about the past.